At 9:04 on a Sunday morning, federal agents removed the cover from a tank buried behind Nancy Guthrie's home. Not a search dog, not a press statement, a probe. Two investigators knelt beside the opening behind the pool and lowered a steel rod into the darkness beneath the property. Carefully, methodically, like people looking for something they already fear may be there. That is the moment this case stopped feeling like a disappearance. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old, gone for 7 days. No medication, no hearing aids, no confirmed sighting. And after publicly insisting there was no reason to keep searching the property, investigators suddenly returned to the exact place they said no longer mattered. At the same time, 3 unmarked vehicles arrived outside a family member's house under cover of darkness. Flash photography erupted inside rooms with the lights deliberately turned off. And somewhere inside the official timeline of this case, an entire hour disappeared. This is not what a stable investigation looks like. This is what happens when the public story and the investigative reality stop matching. Nancy Guthrie lived alone in the Catalina Foothills outside Tucson, Arizona, a landscape of desert silence, gated properties, and homes separated by enough distance that neighbors cannot hear what happens after dark. She was active, independent, deeply connected to her family. She relied on hearing aids. She took daily medication. She watched church services from home every Sunday morning through a one-way live stream because she had stopped attending in person after the pandemic. And on Sunday, October 13th, something happened inside that house. By the time deputies arrived, there was visible blood near the entrance of the home, enough that reporters standing outside the property later captured traces of it on camera. Anyone walking up to that front door would have known immediately that something was wrong. But the timeline surrounding the 911 call became the first major fracture in the case. Initially, the official account suggested nearly an hour passed between the moment family members arrived at Nancy's home and the moment 911 was called. An hour. An hour inside a home where blood was already visible. Then, days later, the timeline changed. Sheriff Chris Nanos publicly revised the sequence. The family arrived at 11:57 a.m. and called 911 at 12:03 p.m., a gap of 6 minutes, not 60. The original hour vanished from the record. And that matters because the discovery time in a missing person case is not a minor detail. It establishes the beginning of the forensic clock. Every movement, every phone record, every surveillance check, every witness timeline branches outward from that moment. Those details do not usually shift by an entire hour. Then came the second fracture. The original explanation for how concern was raised about Nancy centered around church attendance. Specifically, that someone noticed she had not appeared at church that morning. Except Nancy reportedly had not physically attended church for years. She watched by live stream from home. A one-way broadcast. No attendance list. No visual confirmation. No mechanism for anyone at church to notice whether she was watching or not. Which means the explanation that initiated the welfare concern does not hold under scrutiny. Now place those facts side by side. A vanished hour. A church explanation that does not work. And a 911 call investigators still refuse to release publicly. That is not random confusion. That is structural instability at the center of the timeline itself. And here is the critical point. Investigators did not quietly correct a typo. The original timeline was stated publicly, repeatedly, on camera, during official press conferences. Then it disappeared. That is not memory drift. That is a case changing shape in real time. Saturday night. For miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, 3 unmarked, white vehicles arrive outside Annie Guthrie's residence after dark. Reporters stationed nearby documented deputies entering the property, while the house itself appeared mostly dark from the outside. Then the flashes began. Controlled bursts of light inside rooms where overhead lights had intentionally been turned off. For nearly 3 hours, activity continued inside the house without explanation. Observers immediately speculated about forensic processing techniques like luminol, a chemical used to detect traces of blood invisible to the naked eye. Luminol reactions are photographed in darkness because the chemical glows blue when it reacts with iron and hemoglobin. But reporters covering the scene noticed something unusual. No visible forensic suits. No Tyvek gear. No large evidence kits entering the home. Whatever investigators were doing inside the house, it did not resemble a standard publicly visible forensic sweep. At one point, a deputy exited wearing blue latex gloves while carrying a brown paper evidence bag. No explanation was provided. No statement followed. The vehicles left quietly after hours inside the residence. And the next morning, investigators returned to Nancy's property and focused attention on something underground. Behind the home sits a covered tank system, possibly a cistern, septic structure, or underground utility enclosure common in foothill properties not connected to municipal systems. Agents removed the cover. Then they lowered a probe into the darkness below. That action contradicted previous public statements from investigators claiming there was no need to continue searching the immediate property area. The search had supposedly moved beyond the house. Yet here they were again, behind the house, probing beneath the property itself. Investigative behavior tells a story long before press conferences do. And the behavior visible here was escalation, not closure. Then came another contradiction. Publicly, investigators insisted there were no suspects, no persons of interest, and no vehicles of interest. At the same time, federal agents were quietly pulling surveillance footage from businesses positioned between two specific homes. That is not a random collection. That is route reconstruction. The FBI requested surveillance footage from businesses located between Nancy Guthrie's residence and Annie Guthrie's home, roughly 4 miles away. A Chevron station, a Circle K, specific locations along a specific corridor. That matters because the Catalina Foothills offer very little public surveillance infrastructure. Large desert lots, sparse traffic cameras, long stretches of darkness. If investigators targeted those businesses, it suggests they believed a vehicle may have traveled between those properties during the critical time frame. That is operationally significant. At the same time, the investigation itself appeared to expand outward rather than narrow inward. Deputies searched neighboring properties. Private security connected to the family was seen collecting mail while wearing gloves. Investigators maintained visible activity deep into the first week. Behavior inconsistent with a case where law enforcement believes there is simply nothing left to find. Then the ransom demands emerged. According to reporting briefly published and later removed, alleged kidnappers demanded millions in Bitcoin with escalating deadlines attached. Professional hostage negotiators publicly questioned whether a genuine kidnapping operation targeting the mother of a nationally recognized television anchor would make strategic sense at all, because high-profile victims create maximum law enforcement pressure, maximum media attention, maximum visibility. Exactly the conditions professional kidnappers try to avoid, which creates two possibilities investigators may now be balancing simultaneously. Either the ransom demands are authentic, or someone inserted themselves into an already chaotic investigation hoping to exploit fear for money. Neither scenario explains the collapsing timeline. Neither scenario explains the sealed 911 call. And neither scenario explains why investigators returned to probe beneath the property they previously said no longer required searching. The deeper this investigation goes, the less the public statements align with the visible investigative actions. And when those two realities separate, experienced investigators know exactly what that usually means. Law enforcement believes something significant happened much closer to home than they are prepared to say publicly. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. Every passing day matters. She remains missing without medication, without hearing aids, and without any confirmed public evidence. She left that property willingly. What investigators are doing now does not resemble a stalled case. It resembles pressure, nighttime operations, targeted surveillance retrieval, evidence collection, underground probes, sealed recordings. Those are not the movements of investigators wandering blindly. Those are the movements of investigators trying to confirm something before they say it publicly. And the center of everything still comes back to the same unresolved point. The timeline, the missing hour, the revised account, the church explanation that does not withstand scrutiny, the unreleased 911 call. Because every investigative decision now unfolding appears downstream from whatever happened inside Nancy Guthrie's home before authorities were contacted. The FBI has stated the investigation remains active. No arrests have been announced. No one has been charged. And until investigators explain why the official narrative changed so dramatically during the first week, the public questions surrounding this case will continue growing louder. If you have information regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip through tips to fbi.gov. Someone knows what happened in that house. The only remaining question is who speaks first. This case is no longer defined by what investigators are saying. It is defined by what investigators are doing, because actions tell the truth long before press conferences do. A sealed 911 call, a vanished hour, flash photography inside a darkened home, surveillance pulled from a 4-mile corridor, federal agents probing underground structures behind the victim's property. Those are not isolated events. They are pieces of a direction, and eventually, that direction leads somewhere public. Subscribe now, because the next major development in this case, whether it is a forensic result, a vehicle identification, or a federal filing, will likely arrive suddenly and without warning. And when it does, this story changes instantly. The question is no longer whether investigators suspect more than they are saying. The question is how close they are to proving it.